Beowulf, the mightiest man of his time, took to the swan road with his best men aboard. It was time to leave Heorot and the rise Hrothgar to return home and protect their near-forgot kinsmen. They fearlessly faced the wild whale road, the strikes of hellfire oft bursting their sails, but none such sky fury would stop brave Beowulf from reaching his kinsman and that lovely maid. Oft in the depths of the dank cabins below decks, his mind would retreat from that fine-featured face. Beowulf remembered dear Ingrid from before foul Grendel, with her eyes of emerald, her hair of lace. In the mead halls she would listen to Beowulf's tales of war, of the battle-bruised arms and bloodshed he bore. So well did she notice Beowulf's wisdom and pride that once Beowulf thought to make her his bride. But that demonic, villainous creature, that descendant of Cain, had demanded Beowulf's strength and unmatched skill. As his time with Ingrid was cut short and splintered, only a token of her remained to him, his memory. From dusk till dawn, as the blackness faded, Beowulf stalked the slimy deck. He searched the open sky for signs of land, for he longed so desperately to return home, to the hands and hearts that belonged to him. He manned the helm deftly and strained his eyes for that one beautiful maid, dusk till dawn. He plowed on forward, spurring the sea demons and waves in his way, till the sight of green emerged before his eyes, vast and expansive, but familiar. He was home. Shouts and cries pilfered through the air and occupied the hearts of men on board and off. The men of great Geatland had gathered to greet their highest lord and fiercest fighter. Hands grasped Beowulf's, and words of welcome and wonder arrived in his ear as he dismounted the ship. His truest man, Edwig, who had stayed with the Geats, came running forth with a grave smile. Beowulf cried, "Dear Edwig, my fine friend, how are you grieved? My arrival should only bring tidings of joy. Dear Beowulf, my prince, my greatest of kin, you do not know the worries we've withstood in your absence." Beowulf looked upon the sea of men stretched out before him. Some were wounded, all were weary, that was plain to see. Edwig most of all appeared half the man he'd been, whittled down to the bones of his flesh. "My dearest Edwig," exclaimed Beowulf, pulling his finest friend to the side, "you must tell me of these woes that now strike me with venom. I would have returned in an instant had I known of the Geats' suffering and mine own people left waste." "Not all," replied Edwig. "Mostly the peasants, those on the edges of the village, have been murdered and consumed by this awful creature that haunts the bogs and the watery depths surrounding our lands. This cannot continue. What is claiming mine own people? How can this be? How is the castle? And Ingrid? Is she safe?" Edward looked beyond Beowulf. With heavy heart he replied, "Her mother Ingrid is dead. The demon snatched her from a well one cold evening as she gathered the evening pail." "My poor Ingrid!" cried Beowulf, cursing that creature Grendel who had kept him so far. "I will avenge Ingrid's mother, all those murdered, from this being who shies from the daylight. I must go." "Dearest Beowulf," pleaded Edward, "do not stray just yet. This creature is of the vilest nature. She lurks in the depths, forever hidden. No one knows how she kills, but she leaves no trace, no bodily figment of her prey. Do not go just yet, Beowulf. You must regain your strength after such a long and tiresome journey. Partake of meat and mead, rejoin your kin for at least an evening." "No, I must go. I will not allow this bog beetle continue murdering mine own people who have suffered so long and longed for my return." Edward looked along at Beowulf, his truest man, his fiercest warrior friend, and said, "At least let us join you." So the villagers clambered back to the mead hall, bearing all the weight of Beowulf's spoils from Heorot, and bid fond farewell to their hero, great Beowulf, and to his companions who joined his gloomy quest. Beowulf and his thanes went on to the woods, wandering wayward for any sign of sin, for that foul-feared creature that lurked within the deep dog bogglers, delivering death. The forest floor awakened. Beneath the crunch of feet, small birds and rampant rodents scuttled from their strides, and soon they entered the marshland thick with mud and mildew and the scent of death. Beowulf at once sensed that something was awry. The woods which he hunted and loved so dearly were eerily somber, almost quiet. He could tell as they delved deeper into the muck that the murderous presence lurked, hampering even wildlife from leaving hidden homes. As his group trudged on among the thickets dank and heavy, Beowulf suddenly stopped, stood frozen in his tracks. A spectral, inhuman sound had played about his mind. He felt unsure of its very existence, and so he stood stock still, hushed his veins with a look, and listened. Again, the sound that had disturbed his conscience chimed one more time, malicious in its sounding, frightful to the ear. Beowulf beckoned to his fellows. "Something dark and dreadful lurks in the boglands. I must go to it. I would not risk your own lives to a thought that is my own, for leaving my kinsmen when it seems they needed me most." Go, I urge all of you, and when I shall return, you will bear witness to what I encounter this night. This water demon shall pay the blood price. Only Edward remained unwilling to let Beowulf slip from his fingers a final time. Beowulf, I will stay here. I'm your man. Let me aid you in this course of gruesome duty. You honor me, my dear Edwig, but this is the price I must pay for leaving my kinsmen. I will face this bog route alone. Beowulf stalked off into the darkness, into the deep, dank shadows of the creature he met.
And so went forth the great Beowulf into the darkness. Encroaching branches from trees that had seen the dark days of old reached out across Beowulf, forcing the great man to shrink his form. Neither could the sun in its glory breach the darkness of that great forest bog. The mists issuing forth from their dark origin snaked out with fingers like tendrils, as though to grab at the ankles of the great hero. Beowulf continued into the dark forest, never questioning the complete, eerie silence that hath descended upon him since he stalked heroically into the swamp. Swift as a flint in the night, a voice sweet as any other in existence pierced the dark shroud of silence that had till now assaulted the heightened senses of Beowulf. 'Twas the voice of the fair maid Ingrid, whom Beowulf had spent many a sleepless night, her company preferred to that of any other companion. "My lady," he cried the great man, "it is I, Beowulf, returned hence from the realm of Hrothgar, where I, with strength renowned, slew the creature plaguing the fair land." "Beowulf," the voice came again from the deepest part of the foul bog. "Where art thou?" Beowulf issued forth to find the fair maiden. As he did, the great warrior called out, "My lady, I am here, traveling to you. Wherefore art thou alone in this devilish swamp?" Beowulf continued on, feet sinking into the bog as he went. Branches encroached from overhead and underfoot and all around, until the great copper shield from Hrothgar received wouldst fit no longer through the swiftly sifting long-fingered limbs of trees that hath lived in this land before the time of man. "Beowulf," the voice came again, "come to me." Now Beowulf, filled with longing to hold the fair Ingrid in his arms, shed his shield from its perch upon his back. He forced his way through the reaching branches of the dark forest. Where art thou? I can't find thee!" Ingrid called out. A large boulder blocked the path of Beowulf. It was from the hidden side of the stone obstacle that dear Ingrid's voice had come from. Beowulf allowed a smile to split his face as the image of Ingrid filled his mind. He stalked around the stone, expecting to find the young maiden huddled in fear. Instead, Beowulf was faced with nothing but water and a smell of foulest content. Beowulf felt a sharp, searing pain between his shoulders, as though one had passed a newly forged sword through his mail hauberk. Beowulf whirled around, cursing himself for letting his guard down. The face that greeted him was unlike any other alive. 'Twas the face of a great serpent, yet not a serpent, but a woman. 'Twas the face of complete, unnatural wrongness, as though it could not belong to this world. This face was connected to the neck and arms of a woman and the body of a snake. The serpent's tail ended in a vicious barb from which dripped the great warrior's lifeblood. And from the lips of this demon spawn came the voice of his dear Ingrid. "Beowulf! Beowulf, I found you, Beowulf!" Recoiling in horror, Beowulf struck out at the creature with a mighty blow. The serpent moved with blinding speed. Beowulf's mighty blow landed upon the great rock, sending a shower of sparks cascading into the bog. Beowulf, recovering, turning about and seizing the great serpent around the throat. The immense strength of Beowulf, who had single-handed slain the terrible Grendel, was as nothing to the catastrophic coiling mass of carnivorous muscle that now threw him into the swamp. He rose to face his opponent once more, ready to pass on if his time were at hand. The serpent lunged, with her claws outstretched, letting out a pitiless laugh in the voice of Ingrid. The sound was unnatural from the beast. Beowulf swung the mighty blade in an arc that no tree could have withstood. Yet the creature caught the blade in her outstretched hands. Beowulf brought his full, substantial strength to bear. It was then that he realized there was something wrong. His vision, normally sharp as a seabird's, seemed to be cloudy, as though the very mist from the bog had filled his eyes. The serpent's own strength began to overpower Beowulf. With one final surge of energy, Beowulf raked the blade from the serpent's grasp. He rose it above his head that he might vanquish the vile villain. A sharp pain, worse than any before, pierced the side of Beowulf for the first time. Beowulf felt his strength failed him, and he fell into the bog. The great arms of the warrior would not move. His eyes stared up at the infernal abomination as it coiled as though to strike. A flash of brightest light filled Beowulf's vision. As he lay unmoving, he saw an image of a great warrior, tall as the great ones in the stories, walking with a torch held aloft, reflecting off the very polished copper shield that Beowulf had shed. The serpent recoiled from the light, retreating into the darkness. Beowulf could feel his mind slipping away. The great warrior lifted Beowulf from the ground, and the mist took him over entirely. He knew no more. When Beowulf woke, a frail old man greeted his vision. "I know you, Beowulf, and I know too why you could not defeat the beast. It cannot be defeated through strength, but through intellect. Her name is Nathair."
Meanwhile, Beowulf's home was in more than a little distress when they found no trace of his return. Stalwart men of keenest eye found no footprints nor any sign of the great man's struggle. The farmers and smithies and washerwomen began to gossip about the blameless hero. The rumor spread that Beowulf had been bested in battle, or even deserted his cause, fled for fear of some unholy creature, or that, like the others, he had been snatched away by an unseen demon. Beowulf's lady-love, the fair Ingrid, wept that her hero had disappeared as soon as he had arrived, but her faith in him soon defeated her doubts, and despite the din of deniers, she believed that he would return to her. Beowulf stayed 3 days in the hermit's hut, regaining strength, his muscles mustering up all his might, but his recent battle had bewildered his brain, for he found that mere brawn could never defeat his foe. Dark dreams splintered his sleep, foggy fragments of his fears of falling and of failing. He wondered if his better days were now behind. But even so, Beowulf had no intention of lying low. He was keen to come to grips with the hell snake, to prevail or else to fail, to do or die. It was useless to gather strength in numbers, to call more men to his side to fight. The demon could crush the crew in seconds. So Beowulf knew he must go it alone. So after 3 days, the hero rose. He thanked his host for his healing and guidance. Beowulf said, "I owe you my life, for you salvaged mine. If it were not for your kindness, I would have become a flavorsome snack for a snickering snake. My time spent here was the eye of the storm, a passing peace in the seething struggle. That peace was what I needed to heal and gather the wisdom that will support my success." The hermit bid the hero a hearty farewell, and Beowulf went off to settle a score with hell. Through the tangled wood he walked to the battle bog. Branches bearing his bold quest, dark clouds began to block the great golden eye as Beowulf traveled boldly upon the bitter green. The cautionary cries of catbirds and crows did not cause him to waver. No, instead he stepped boldly with willful intent. Suddenly the air grew stagnant, all except the sour sweet wind that warned him of his foe. He could smell the hellworm's greasy scales, the very breath of hell. Hawk-like he watched and waited, for he knew the demon maggot could smell him as well. He intended to see tomorrow's sun. He intended to see his friends again on this side of the great divide, for he intended to prevail. Then he heard the spectral voice, the sound of his lady-love, or so it seemed. But Beowulf was wiser than before. He was not duped by the devil's deception. He put his plan into action. Seeing the shadow of the slinking snake, he used a trick of his own. "Halloo, my love, I'm here," came Beowulf's cunning cry. The hero took care that his call echoed upon the rocks and trees. He threw his voice like a professional conjurer. The echo did its duty. The snake could not decipher the true hiding spot of Beowulf. The snake sniffed the air, here and there, trying to catch the scent of her prey, but Beowulf was moving in circles, round and around the snake. His scent was left to linger from every direction, north, south, east, and west. Nathair the snake grew angry, irate at this trick, for she was getting hungry. "Halloo, hell snake, I'm here," came Beowulf's cunning cry. The serpent spun round in circles until she was quite giddy, but Beowulf's plan was not quite done. Wild and wily Beowulf crept closer to the creature. He had but a moment to complete his scheme. The snake's uncanny face was still as she sniffed the sluggish day breath. Beowulf crept closer and closer until he stood directly behind the snake. He placed his face quite close to hers. He stood, his eyes level with her throbbing throat. "Halloo, old worm, I'm here," came Beowulf's cunning cry. The hell snake reared and lifted her tail, the venomous weapon of paralyzing death. She was aiming for Beowulf, who stood behind her, but it was not Beowulf that she stabbed. The sting of her tail met with the scaly skin of her own throat. She had stung herself. She could not scream. Her voice was mute, for she was choking on her own slimy poison. She now had a taste of her own medicine. Beowulf stood back to observe his work. The snake was now looped, tail to face to tail, stiff as a statue, a scaly frozen circle. The folk of the kingdom were shocked to see their hero prince marching home again. The ones who doubted could hardly believe their eyes. Fair Ingrid could barely conceal her joy as she greeted her hero. He told them of the blood-stained bog and of his death dance with the hell snake. He told them of its spectral voice and of his triumph through the cunning and stealth. There was much rejoicing in the mead hall. The ale flowed generously into the gullets of the strong and the frail, master and slave, the fool and the wise. Even the hermit who healed the hero was invited to dine. Even so, some still doubted, believing that their troubles were not yet over, that the demon was still on the prowl. "Come along," said Beowulf, "and see, the worm still paralyzed on the bog floor. If you cannot believe me, perhaps you will trust your own eyes." Indeed, the serpent stood immobilized beneath the shuddering cypress, stock still as if turned to stone, a trail of bog-brown blood trickling from her damned throat. The ones who doubted begged pardon for their distrust. But it would not do to leave her there, with her venom flowing so freely. So Beowulf, with his massive might, pushed the serpent to a spot, a place where the bog was soft and murky. There she sank into the bog, to be mummified, frozen forever in time. For years to come, when the children of the town were disobedient or woefully willful, the mothers and nurses would give them a warning. If each did not heed their parents' words, Nathair would rise up again from her grave and snatch them stealthily as they slept and drag them back with her to the bog.